I want to thank everybody for registering for the fourth Business Matters Chat. We welcome your participation and questions, as Anna said earlier. After Chief Howell is done speaking, we'll take as many questions as we can get in at the time that's left. So if you wouldn't mind forwarding your questions to Anna in the chat box, that would be great. So with that, today I'm pleased to have with us Art Howell, Chief of Police for the Racine Police Department. Art was appointed to the City of Racine Police Department in July of 1984. Art, I was 3 years out of high school. Wow. And he served the citizens of this community in law enforcement capacity for the past 36 years, serving in a number of positions within the department during his tenure, which included the gang unit officer, traffic investigator, detective, and public information officer. After being promoted to the rank of lieutenant in 2000, he served as the lieutenant of detectives. After being promoted to the rank of captain in 2003, he was assigned to the Support Services Division, where he oversaw the department's $24 million budget. In 2008, he was transferred to the Investigative Division in his new rank as the Deputy Chief of Police. Chief Howell is a graduate of the 235th session of the FBI National Academy in Quantico, Virginia. While attending this 3-month training course with law enforcement professionals from around the world, he completed his Master's of Science in Management from the College of Business and Management from Cardinal Stritch University. Art's married to April Johnson Howell for 36 years. They have 2 children, Bianca Danielle and Corbin Johnson Howell. After 36 years of continued service to the citizens of Racine, he is scheduled to retire as of December 31st. So please join me in welcoming a gentleman, a friend, and our Chief of Police, Art Howell.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. So what I'd like for everyone to do, so that we can start off on the right foot, is forget like 99%, of what you just heard. But there were 2 things that were important. So the first thing was who I'm married to. April has just been, and Liz and some other people know April. She's just been a sweetheart. When you have a job like mine where the phone can ring at 1, 2 in the morning and you have to go to work, and she's just been really great. So I'm glad that you mentioned April and the kids. The other thing I thought was interesting is when Matt said that he was 3 years out of high school in 84 when I was hired. Just for the record, I graduated in 80, so I was only 4 years out of high school. So take that for what it's worth. Just a complete honor to spend some intimate time with you all this morning. And thanks for turning the videos on. I saw Barb and Liz and so many other people. This will be an amazing opportunity for me to just do what I'm often not able to do in person, and that's just to say thanks. What we've been able to accomplish here over the last 28 years is nothing short of phenomenal. And I do not take for granted the way we accomplished what we accomplished. Many of you know I was a disciple under the Chief Polzin era. Chief Polzin introduces this philosophy. This is 1992. He was appointed. 93. He's up and running with the philosophy. 95. I become the public information officer / planning sergeant / grant writer. So I wrote like nearly $40 million in state, federal, and local grants to build the COP infrastructure. A large portion of those dollars came from the Racine Community Foundation and SC Johnson, and of course some of your member organizations supported COP effort as well. And so we're just grateful for the support that we've received from the community. Another thing I'd like to say thank you for, I had a unique opportunity. I think the invitation came from Jeff Neubauer, but when there was a lot of fanfare over who our next chief would be. So Jeff invites me to, I think it was the President's Council at the time. I'm sorry, it wasn't the President's Council. It was, it had a different name, but it ultimately became the President's Council. And so I go to this meeting, and like Helen Johnson Leopold's there, and almost every top executive you can name in town. And I was a little intimidated, I must admit, but I had my trusty iPad with me, and my iPad was kind of like Linus's blanket. I think the group was 4 Racine at the time. So I'm invited. It was a lunch, but it was really almost like an informal interview. And so everybody in the room was very supportive of me becoming the chief. And I had my trusty iPad with me. And so what I was able to do during that short session was to basically share a lot of the things that I'd learned under Chief Polzine's leadership. And I think by the time the meeting was over, there was this understanding that we should have some continuity from the Polzine era to the next generation of leaders. And so, but I just wanted to thank everybody that was in the room that day, because not only did they support me that day, they supported me every day thereafter for the past nearly 8 years. And for whatever we've been able to achieve here, it wasn't through my leadership alone, it was through the partnerships. And so with that, I'd like to kind of engage in some Q&A so that I don't talk the whole time. We can make this time worthwhile. I could literally talk all day, and many of you know that. And I do have a PowerPoint here that I'm not going to force down your throat. I just have it here for reference purposes in case something comes up that I need to have more detail on. So I'm not exactly sure what the full format was designed to be, but I'm prepared for anything. So, and don't make me show you this PowerPoint. I will if I have to.
Well, I did get a couple questions ahead of time in advance, so I can start with those. And like I mentioned before everybody joined, they're a little bit on the personal side. So hopefully some questions come about, Racine and stuff.
Sure.
But with your retirement coming up, people are interested. What are some plans? Are you staying in the area? Are you living in Racine?
So here's the deal. So my mother is 86 years old, and so she lives in a condo not far from the Racine Community Foundation there, where her grandchildren have condos as well. So as long as she's around, I'm going to have to be here. She's kind of self-sufficient. She drives everywhere on her own pre-COVID. And so as long as she's here, I'll be here. And then I'm actually working with John Shannon and Elder Cornett's son, Jerry Cornett, on this building on North Memorial. We're trying to get some STEM training in there. Now, it's a heavy lift because, when you're trying to sustain an organization such as that, there's a lot of planning that has to go into that. And so I'm hoping that by virtue of not having to come to work here every day, I'm going to be able to do some things that are more passion oriented. And so we'll see how that works out. So yeah, short term, looks like you guys are not going to be able to get rid of me right away.
I think that's just fine. Another question that came in ahead of time was, assuming that one of your best days was being promoted and appointed to chief, what was another best day on your job?
Oh, so many things that occurred, but I'll just say this. So the day that I learned that I would be appointed chief, that was unique. But I think what was really profound was like we were normally when we do swearing in ceremonies, like it happens in the auditorium of the police department. No huge major fanfare, but this time we moved it to City Hall because it was so many people, and it was like it was just an amazing event. When I look back on it, and there's video of it, the event appeared to be like so much bigger than me, like than one person. It was like a celebration of a lot of different things. So that was, that kind of stands out as a high point in my career, because again, if we get into talking about me personally, then I get a little embarrassed, but like that day was like it was a day that like the community, like I saw people like Chuck Tyler. Chuck Tyler was in that same space as a leader in the late 60s, fighting for civil rights. And then like he was there on this day. It was like amazing. And like I was a part of this thing. So it's hard to explain, but like my parents, there's this book called The Warmth of Another Sun, and it's about the 6 million people that came from the South for a better life. Like, and so it was this serendipity type thing where I was like, this is a big deal. So now I got to live up to it.
Well, with that being said, somebody said, how can we replace you? So how does it work? What's kind of a succession plan? What should we expect here after December 31st?
Yeah, so great question. So like 5 minutes, I almost came on the call late because I had some young people in my office, relatively young, in their 40s. And we started succession planning quite a while ago. And earlier this year, like pre-COVID, we started mapping out like the age group of our senior leaders, what the likely timetable would be for their departure, and what we needed to do to prepare people for that eventuality. Now, what happened, unfortunately, was, some of the changes in benefit structure is going to force some of those people out at the end of this year, where we were hoping that some of the transition could take place next year. But the point is we've been very intentional about, preparing this next group of folks. Unfortunately, we're probably going to have to replace more people within the next 8 months than we really want to. But at the same time, as I discussed with the commanders that were in my office just before this meeting, we have some really competent young people in this organization. And as long as the older folks stay in the way, we'll never get to see their full potential, right? So we have to trust, just like, okay, so I'll just give you a quick example. In 1995, like I was in this very office, it didn't have the contemporary furniture that it has now, but Chief Polzine was my boss. I was a sergeant, but because of the position that I held as the planning sergeant and the public information officer, I would be in the chief's office like on a regular basis, right? And so what happened during those years, you could have never convinced me that I was going to go a lot further than the rank of sergeant, but there's so much that I learned during that time. What I've tried to do over the last 8 years, ensure that there was enough of those experiences for other people, right? And so I'm very encouraged and hopeful that the same influence that Chief Polzine had on me, that I would have had on others, and that they'll be able to take this baton and go a lot further than we ran.
So our question, our community in the last 12 to 18 months has been through an awful lot. We've had some what I'll call very disturbing things happen. We had the misfortune of having a couple of officers in our community killed. How is Racine PD doing? How are you doing with all of this? And are they healing?
Yeah, so great question. And so here's what I can tell you. So starting with the homicide of John Hetland, I mean, that was a major blow. Like, this organization had not lost an officer in the line of duty since 1974. I was like 12 years old when that happened. So none of us, I mean, we all walk past the memorial wall when we come in the building, but we tasted the sting of losing an officer like real time. And so if I cannot overstate the impact of that. And then, so John has 2 children, Hunter and Brooke. Hunter's 16, almost 17 now, and Brooke is 10. And so we interact with his family on a regular basis, mom, his dad, his children. And so that's a major loss. And then we lost Jen Diener. in a car accident, fatal car accident, not 7 months later. So if I were to tell you that those things did not impact the officers, I would not be truthful. On the upside, the night of John's homicide, we had been in negotiations with a therapist to come in to help us deal with just being in this profession. We did not sign the contract with her prior to John's death. But what happened is when the tragedy happened, I reached out to her, I called her, and I told her what happened, and she was at the police department like within 30 minutes, and she's not left. She was in my office 45 minutes ago. She has to, and so here's the beauty of it, right? She doesn't report to me. She doesn't work for me. Whatever she learns from the other officers, it's not like she reports back to me. When she comes into my office, she's coming to check on me. Like, how are you doing? So that's good. So I got to go a little further when you ask how the officers are doing. So I just level set by telling you what they've been through on a more intimate level. So in addition to having Liz here as our therapist, and she's just been great. We actually have a wellness room, and so Butterbuds helped us with the wellness room. They bought all brand new appliances. So the wellness room is like a studio apartment, right? So it used to be like, as an officer, when I grew up, the break room was right near the sergeant's office. So if you took a break, if you got a soda or whatever, like you didn't want to be there too long because the lieutenants and everybody was there. Like the wellness room is like on a completely different floor, as far away from my office as you can get. And the wellness room is, it's like a studio apartment. It's like, if you go in there, we went through the All Saints Foundation, and they purchased like self-help books, whether it's suicide prevention or depression or marriage counseling books. And so it's a large screen TV in there. There's a massage chair. We stock it with healthy items. It's a place to go. You can take your gun belt off. There's a divider screen for privacy if you want to be in the massage chair and not be bothered. And so we built this place for officers to go decompress. And so between the therapist that we have, and this is not, you don't have to request the therapist through EAP. If you want to talk to the therapist, we bought her a phone that's not connected to our network, and you can have a private conversation with the therapist. And so between the therapist, between the wellness room, and we did one other component that I'll share with you, and some of you guys were gracious enough. Matt came. What we did is we're constantly getting food from the community, right? Especially through the George Floyd tragedy. Right? So pizza would show up. Liz Powell brought people would always bring us food. But when I said to my good friends, I said, hey, listen, I said, what would really be neat if the next time you bring food, or even you don't have to necessarily bring food, just if you could just come and talk to the troops and tell them how you feel. And it doesn't have to be like a dissertation, right? You could come and spend 5 minutes, 2 minutes, 10 minutes in your own way. Just tell them how you feel. So Matt came, Liz came, Fisk Johnson came, John Shannon, just a lot of folks who really, the Langendorfs came on the anniversary of John's death. I cannot tell you what that did for morale. So they're doing better.
What else can we do? What else do you need? This is a community of leaders here. There's more than are on this call, but what else can we do?
So it's just more of the same. I mean, I want to, because of COVID, we kind of shut down the roll call visits, but they're going to need that and moving forward. And what they're really going to need is, and I tell them this all the time. So I have all these relationships in the community, and that's a part of it, right? But it's not like when I leave, the support from the community is going to dissipate, right? It's still going to be there. So it would be good for us to maybe put a calendar before I leave, kind of put a calendar in place where, like, for the next 6 months, we're going to have these leaders come in to talk to the troops, right? So that it's not like, well, Art left, all of his friends left too.
Okay. Well, we can work on doing that. We should absolutely do that. I'm sure many would welcome the opportunity.
Yeah, so that would be good.
Okay.
Yes, yes. A question in the queue I have here is, I lost it here. So moving kind of forward, looking to the future, if you have any, forward thinking, maybe you have a crystal ball, who knows? What's your biggest concern for public safety in the near future?
Yeah, so great question. So the George Floyd situation, and then followed up by Jacob Blake and Kenosha. I mean, that took a lot of oxygen out of the room. If you're a young person, why would you do this job? So oddly enough, I hired 4 people like last week. So that's the first question that I was asking those guys when it came to the chief's interview. They've gone through the police and fire commission interviews, talked to our panel that we have in our training area. First question I want to know is, what are your thoughts about the current policing environment post George Floyd? And then, why would you want to become involved in that? And to a person, they were like, well, ironically enough, the atmosphere actually makes me want to do the job even more. And so, as far as the future, we just have to really be intentional about finding people who want to be problem solvers. I mean, if I go back to the history of policing, right? It used to be the situation where they just wanted big people who could intimidate people, and your size had to be proportionate to your weight, and we just wanted people who could handle themselves in a fight. Now we're looking for people who can de-escalate calls and never have to have a fight. It's easier that way. And so, yeah, we just have to be really intentional about the people that we bring here. And then, as Matt knows, we're working on, the Academy's model that we have has shown some promise. And so what we decided is that, as opposed to having to find officers from Ashwaubenon or Green Bay or other places around the state or country, we have to be really intentional about building our own homegrown group of people that understand what the community looks like and how to manage it and how to thrive in it. And so this fall, we're ready to start that cohort of a public safety cohort where we're going to start building our own officers for the future. So that's pretty exciting, actually. And that's one of the things that I'm really working hard on these last few weeks is making sure that cohort gets off the ground. I won't bore you with too many of the details, but I will tell you, this idea came from one of our detectives who manages our Explorer Post. Now, the Explorer Post, you can't join until you're 15, and then you age out at 18. So we lost many of those people that we cultivated. We lost them between 18 and 21 because you can't be hired until you're 21. So now under the new model with the pathway that we're going to be the public safety pathway, what's going to happen is we're going to work with those people right around the time that they're eligible to go into the Explorer Post, going to work with them through high school, and then we're looking to have an in-house support system where they could work as cadets between 18 and 21 and be ready to hit the road. Now, these will be people that we would have worked with, the better part of 8 years by the time they're hired. So you're gonna weed out people, and you're gonna know what you have by the time the chief is in the position to offer a job. So of all the things that we've done here, that's probably like the most exciting thing that we've worked on, other than flipping neighborhoods around.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's a great gap to fill. Absolutely. So switching a little bit to nonprofits, we do have a couple people in the, watching in the audience that represent nonprofits. What can those in that sector do to engage with the police department and include the police department in opportunities in the future? So
the nonprofit world is kind of like the fuel that makes this engine run. I mean, because whether you're looking at, so we do homework assistance at the COP houses. We have got meal programs that we've done. And that's all done. Right now, we have a partnership with Salvation Army, where we provide healthy meals for people in these food deserts and people that have food insecurities. So really, the nonprofit world is, that's just, if we can't really operate without nonprofit world. If you look at what we're doing, even in a completely different area, but still the nonprofit connection. Look at the work that we're doing in the space of human trafficking. As a young officer in 1984, I'm in the academy. I was trained that human trafficking was a victimless crime. Nobody no harm, no foul. Wrong. Most women that are involved in human trafficking, and it's not just women, it could be young men as well, but most women, that's not a natural choice. So usually by the time they're manipulated into that, or otherwise groomed into that, maybe they were molested as a child, or there's other variables that go into that, but it's not a natural choice. Well, so that's how police officers were trained. But then I ran into the Dominican sisters who rewired me to understand that no, this is not a victimless crime, and you need to do something about it. And so then we brought Carrie Hemmick and her group on. That was a nonprofit organization that worked with us. The work that Carrie has done has just been nothing short of phenomenal. I've got a document that she put together, a multi-page document that we just shared with the other chiefs in our jurisdiction yesterday during our monthly leaders meeting, regional leaders meeting. And if it were not for the work that we were able to get done through Carrie's organization, Fight to End Exploitation, we just could not accomplish half the things that we've accomplished in that space. And so whether it's fighting human trafficking or fighting poverty, homelessness, the nonprofits are just a major part of this community policing philosophy.
Absolutely. We just, we're talking about, just have to give a plug for Leadership Racine. We were just talking about having them speak to Leadership Racine. I thought that was a fantastic idea.
Hey, thanks for the prompt. So Jesse Matoya, I'm probably the highest profile Leadership Racine grad. So myself, Judy Gavigan, Dave Mack, Milton Dockery, Bridget Johnson, we came out of that first cohort, and that's great. But then you have people like Jesse Matoya, more recent grad, first female to wear a white shirt on this organization, will certainly not be the last. Do not be shocked if you see her sitting in my seat. Leadership Racine can't be acknowledged enough in this conversation. Hats off to Karen Beyer. That's all.
Thank you for saying that. You're one of our best cheerleaders too. So for those of you who don't know, Leadership Racine is a program of RAMAC, and Art was in the first class, and we're on year 23 now. So thank you for your continued support of that program. So we have to talk about COVID. How can't we? How do you see, or what do you see as the appropriate role of law enforcement officers in enforcing mask mandates and other COVID-related regulations?
Yeah, so a couple things. So, and you all may not know this, but if you go to the Officer Down Memorial page, there's just an unbelievable amount of stories on there that are just heartbreaking, right? New York lost several officers in the middle of this pandemic early on. And so there's over 140 officers that died through COVID exposure. So it's real. But I've been very direct in telling the mayor and our health administrator that, the idea of police officers being used in that light was, I was not supportive of that. And it's not for political reasons. It's practical, right? I felt like the health department could deal with that, right? So give us the information we need. And if there's people who I mean, and inform people, like under the community policing philosophy, you want to solve problems, you don't want to create them. We don't want to come off like some kind of occupying force, right? So, and we had shortages anyway, and so it just didn't add up. But what I told our health department was, I said, listen, we have officers that are on light duty, and if the health department goes out and if they inform, and then people continuously just blow them off, and you guys, want to use people on light duty to help you with your citation management or something, that's fine. I says, but the idea of me putting police officers in harm's way for something that could be done a different way, more strategically, I wasn't in support of that. And so, and they know, I mean, I've been pretty direct about it because there's other things we need to be engaged in. And so that's my position on it. But yeah, it's real. But there's ways that we can deal with it strategically without coming off as this occupying force.
Well, and I guess, yeah, people have to realize that, yeah, you're being affected as well. Your officers are being affected as well. I think sometimes we forget that as essential workers, you're being affected. A little bit of a switch of a topic is perpetuating the COP program, that whole thing, a prerequisite for the next chief? Like you must do so, or how is that? How do you know it's gonna stay stable?
So great question. So I remember talking with Mike Batten a few years ago about like this master plan that they were putting together for Unified, and when I talked to Mike, Mike's thing was like, well, no matter how many superintendents come and go, this is a blueprint that this community has adopted, and if you want to be successful here, you're going to have to adapt it. I believe that's where we are with the COP philosophy. I mean, a chief could come and have quite a bit of latitude in terms of what they want to do from a leadership perspective. I would think that anything to do with trying to dismantle the COP network would be a recipe to be let go. And so to answer your question more succinctly, during the interview process, I think the community should definitely have a voice in that whole process. And the community, I mean, should basically dictate the terms of the next chief. I mean, and from my perspective, I don't know how you could come here and be successful without embracing the work that has been done. Now, that doesn't mean you're married to the model as it's currently practiced. So I'll give you an example. As much as I learned from Chief Polzine, and it was quite a bit, at some point it became apparent to me that what was going on in the school systems was untenable in this sense, that there's 20,000 people between the students and the staff. So Unified is almost like the size of Pleasant Prairie. And so when we built this COP model for schools, we did this with the understanding that students, I mean, their brains aren't even developed until they're in their late teens, early 20s. And so there's a lot of stuff that was going on in the school that wasn't criminal. It was more behavioral, but it was being managed in a criminal sense. And so we completely flipped that model. And so even though I learned a great deal from Chief Polzine, I had to apply this knowledge in a new way in the school system. And so I wouldn't say that someone who came here would have to be married to the model as it is without modification. They have to be resourceful enough and forward-looking enough and agile enough and creative enough to basically evolve subject to the needs of the community. But the baseline core problem-solving philosophy is the secret sauce. Like how you manage that is, you should have some flexibility that way. So I don't think they have to be married to everything we did. They just can't undermine it.
Yeah, I'm not sure the community would allow that. You're correct. A lot of support there. So we have just over 5 minutes. I want to ask you that on that PowerPoint that you didn't want to show us, is there something though that you want to make sure that you do tell us, let us know, and then we could, wrap it up with maybe one more question. I don't want that PowerPoint to go to waste for you.
Yeah. So here's what I can do. I can send it to you. Really, it kind of starts out with a few slides, modified versions of slides that when Chief Polzin was here, he and I went to San Diego to do a presentation on community policing, and then we went to the Attorney General's Conference in 1998 to do a presentation. So it starts out with kind of a problem statement, like where we were in the early 90s. Milwaukee, or we were like per capita, we were the worst. We had the worst Part 1 crime in the state. And then it kind of evolves into some of the other things that we've done. And so it's just a neat little narrative in terms of where we came from. And if you notice, Milwaukee and Chicago, like right now, they both have record homicide rates in their respective cities. And, our community, we've just had years of trust equity that have been built, that has been built. And we're pretty grateful that we have the support that we have. And so, yeah, the slideshow just kind of goes through some of the challenges that we had early on and how we navigated through that stuff. And so, yeah, I can share this for future reference. It's a great story, but the story is so much bigger than just my tenure, right? So this spans over the course of 28 years. And just really quickly, so we did this when the Thelma Orr house was burned after the George Floyd event. A young person from Kenosha and a young lady from Mount Pleasant that were the catalyst for that whole thing. So they weren't even from Racine, so they didn't know who Thelma Orr was. In fact, the young lady who helped start the fire, she thought it was a police officer's house, which made it worse. Like they thought they were burning up a police officer's house, and so this all happens, and it was because of. So when that happened, it was this weird trajectory where the community all of a sudden went from being adversarial to being supportive of the police department, because that particular name resonated in the community in a way that, was such that people were offended that somebody would burn the house with her name on it. So it was this bizarre thing where we were vilified at first, but then when they burned that house, then all of a sudden we became heroes. But when we did the video for the restoration of that house and what that house was all about, one of the COP officers, and this person is very understated, they don't speak very much, but I released this at about midnight going into Saturday morning. So when the group of officers came to work at 8 o'clock the next morning, this particular detective had been a COP officer 6 years ago. And he says, Chief, he said, this video was amazing. He says, I've tried to explain to my friends and my family and other people what we do in these houses and why we do it. He says, I was never able to quite capture the spirit of what we did. He says, but that video makes clear why we're doing, and it was very fulfilling in that this officer felt like, now I can finally explain to people why we do what we do. And that was major because 28 years worth of doing this, there's been over 60 officers assigned to these positions and going all the way back to Marty DeFati, who's in his 70s now. It's amazing. People remember Chief Polzin and they remember me, but there's several hundred people in between there internally, and then externally, there's a few thousand that make this work. So the PowerPoint is more or less an acknowledgement of all the work that has been done, and hopefully it'll encourage next generation to just keep it moving.
Yeah, I can share that with everybody who registered for this, if that's okay with you.
Yep. As soon as we're done, I'll send it to you, your
Great.
email.
Great. Matt, I do have one other little question, unless you had something before.
No, that's fine. Go ahead.
Okay. You mentioned Chicago and Milwaukee. So in the last, couple minutes here, do you think that what's going on there, I don't know how to ask this. It's not happening as badly here, but has there been a bit of an uptick here? And if we're not as bad as maybe it feels, do you think it is because of the COP?
So great question. So here's the deal. We have had an uptick here as well in terms of, like, we had the event at the beach where there was 5 people that were shot. That was horrific. I was trying to, now this is slightly editorial, but it'll be useful for your members. So we had a lot of people in our community, and their intentions were really good. You know, they wanted to have, you know, events where people could come together and protest. And certainly that's what our government is all about. And the right to air your grievances publicly. But I was trying to explain to everybody, hey, the more we have these events, the more our officers are demoralized because they have to work overtime and they have to cover these events. And not only do they have to cover these large events, they're not covering the areas where they're supposed to be covering. It was not an accident that a bunch of gang members went down to the lakefront. I'll tell you why they went there. Because we weren't there. Because we had to be at these other places. And so we had 12 individual marches during that whole George Floyd event. And I know a lot of the folks, you know, that led the marches, and they're good people. And they had some decent interest at heart, but I was trying to explain to them, A, you're draining our resources because we have to be at all these marches, and you're demoralizing our officers, and we're not in the places where we need to be. So I get that you want to make the statement, but the counter, the unintended consequences, you have all these other things going on. So we have seen an uptick, and we have had some issues. The COP philosophy is a difference maker, right? Because in some of these other cities, and this is not hyperbole. This is fact, right? Some of the other cities, there'll be major events happen like homicides or whatever, and they just look at the police as another gang. They won't even call. They won't talk to the police. Whereas here, we've got officers who people in the community have their personal cell numbers, and they'll call them and say, hey, this is what happened, you know. And so the work that we've done over the last 28 years has definitely made a difference. And so it cannot be understated. I'm not selling this like snake oil. This is real. And we have to do everything we can do to preserve it. Otherwise, we will be like Milwaukee and Chicago.
Well, a lot of people are saying you'll be missed. You've done a great job. All the things that embarrass you, we know. But I know everybody does want to thank you. Is there going to be any big parties that we need to know about, or
Socially distanced parties?
Yeah. So my wife, who's normally like kind of like this shrinking violet, right? She wants to do something virtually. Like I kind of wanted to just ride off into the sunset like Polzini rode off on his horse, and with not a lot of fanfare. But there's people around town who are not going to let me do that. And my wife is one of them. So definitely, we want to do something virtually so that I can, I was thinking about taking out this big, huge, ad in the journal so that I could thank everybody for all the support. And but it may be better to just do that virtually. And we may have something next year, a dinner or something, a reception when the climate is a little better. But I don't want to I don't want to walk away without saying thanks. And so my wife is working on doing something so that we can all communicate virtually. So look forward to an invite for that.
Great. Matt, you want to wrap it up?
Sure. Well, Chief, it goes without saying that this community is indebted to you for all the service that you've given us. We wish you nothing but the best. Please enjoy your retirement. I hope we get to see you in the community quite often, at least as often as you want to be seen. But please, you are always welcome here at RAMAC. Stop in, say hello, have a cup of coffee, whatever. I look forward to engaging in conversations with you in the future. I've always enjoyed our conversations we've had in the past. So thank you for taking time today and doing this. We truly appreciate it. So enjoy your retirement, sir.
Thank you so much. You guys have a great day.
Thank you. Thanks to everybody for joining. Have a great day, everybody. Take care.
Thank you.